that really isn't trained in that particular library science to really engage the students in literacy, in media literacy, maybe, blogging, adding digital components, whatever it is, but really digging down and drilling down as to why you want to start it and then developing a theme. And when I say that sometimes there really isn't a theme and that is your theme, you can certainly, by the idea of starting off small where you are right now, is to add certain elements. I mean, there's nothing wrong with starting off with one particular space, one station, and then adding on from there. So your initial theme might be circuitry, but by the time you expand this out, you're now delving into paper arts or this and that. Or there again, your theme might be just kind of concentrated in circuitry, in robotics, or anything like that. Because as you drill down and look at the alignment to learning, as I've helped guide individuals and schools in this, might see, well, there's a gap in the learning in science in fifth grade and fourth grade of environmental science or anything like that. So maybe that's an area you want to focus on, and that's the space where students are going to collaborate and make prototypes and do all the things that their classroom time doesn't allow for. So those are some of the ideas. The idea of crafting that plan, there's really, and I love the number of three, as you can tell, three kind of key ingredients. First big thing when you're taking a look at crafting that plan is sustainability. That's a really, really tough nut to crack, is how are you going to sustain this? Because far too often in our education system, sustainability comes with personnel, with people. That, this individual here, I'll use you as an example there, Gil. Gil starts something and it's great and this and that, and as long as Gil is with that school as a 7th grade science teacher, it's sustainable. But then once he leaves, boom, it collapses. It's a house of cards. So taking a look at how this can be self-sustaining. And one of the key ingredients that I've found in developing a makerspace is not only having that buy-in from all of your stakeholders, your staff, your classified staff, your media specialists, your teachers, your students and everything, but having this really be student-led. I mean, beyond student-centered, having it be student-led. Because if the students love this, they understand the concept, they understand how to, unpack all the materials, knowing, what the challenges are in the circuitry area or this and that, or coming with their own and understanding how to use an iPad or any, thing to document the process, blah, blah, blah. They're going to carry it forward. Create, mentorship opportunities, peer, mentoring, so that they're involving, the younger grades and everything like that. So then what happens is that no matter what staff member, you can have a change in principals, you can have a total overhaul of the staff or district leadership or anything, that makerspace will sustain itself because it is very grassroots. It's got the buy-in of all those individuals and it's grassroots. It's not from the top down of this one individual say, well, we're gonna have this here. Okay. The other area is scalability. How can you scale up? And that kind of goes hand in hand with the sustainability, is how are you going to add on from year to year? And that goes into my third aspect, is my third kind of ingredient is the funding. It takes money. Even if you have this real start, the small kind of startup of paper arts and yarn and this and that, or, an innovation center where it's just like, you're just throwing broken materials and this and that and come up with this challenge of making, accessibility for, a student or this and that, and you got duct tape and this and that. Bottom line is that still costs money. And even if you go out to, acquire the donated items and this and that, from the standpoint of budget, it's still costing money because it's taking human energy. that people are going to have to reach out to those organizations, those people to say, will you donate this, blah, blah, blah. Now you have to have, the storage of it. You're going to have to count it, take, inventory, this, and that. That still comes down to money. Because if you're expecting, like in a lot of my cases of working with the schools, we've had cuts in our media specialist area. So we no longer have certified staff in those areas. So it's not a certified, library, media specialist that went to, college and got their degree and is certified in library science. It's a classified individual, and they're paid, they're given 29 hours and they have that schedule, and now they can't go beyond that unless it's, authorized and blah, blah, blah. So there again, it brings you back to budget. So what we take a look at is applying for grants, looking for sponsorship, this and that, and outlining a plan that, okay, again, we're starting off small. Like in this one example, just targeting the 5th grade as a K-5 school. But next year we have in mind, these are the stations that we want to add on to 4th grade. This is how they're aligned to the learning. In 4th grade science, there is that emphasis on magnets and this and that. So we're going to add those. Now we're going to ask for a grant. We're going to apply for all these grants, blah, 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 to fund the 4th grade. Because our plan is by 2020, we will include all the rest of these grades because we'll add on 2 grades every year. That's where the scale up comes in, and the funding and the grants. So those 3 areas are just really, really key. That master plan, the rest of that master plan, is really a master plan because you've got to consider, okay, now you've added on all these pieces in your budget and your scale up. How are you going to train people? Where are you going to store things? Your roles and responsibilities, and creating a whole timeline. So, if you want to launch this MakerSpace, say, by just before spring break, you have to really backtrack and say, okay, if we're going to get these items ordered and this and that, how long is that going to take? Now, nevertheless, you still have to train those adults as part of the process, in the library space, because even if you're going to give that leadership, to the students, that media center, director, librarian still needs to understand what's going on, so you have to have time with them. You have to build in time for individuals like myself. What I basically do is I go out and I'll lead that session, kind of facilitate it, so that I'll introduce the students to a space and show them maybe what the challenge is, monitor that time because we're always in a time crunch, Most of these students have these specials or anything like that for 30 minutes. So, and 30 minutes goes like that from the time that, say, sometimes like a 3rd grade class comes in, after recess or after lunch, and you get them into the places where you want them to be, their teams, and who's going to, kind of assign those teams. Hi, is that Jerry?
Hello.
Come on in.
Okay.
I was just chatting about the master plan of a makerspace. So you've got to consider all of those elements that, within the 30-minute time frame, you've got to introduce the students. On this card you'll find your challenge of the day at the robotics center or at the innovation center, and this and that. Big factor you've got to consider with any students, whether it's high school, middle school, anything like that, is the cleanup process. The setup, the cleanup. If you're going to have little bits, circuitry, everything like that, you've got them stored in, Ziploc bags, and then they go into a plastic bin. You've got to consider that. And then also the inventory process, because that all goes back to money. So are you going to have a student who's going to be that student manager of, materials manager, everything like that. So they take that inventory of all those pieces. We have a broken, breadboard here, or this and that. And what do they do to document that so that it goes back into that inventory, and now we have to replace that. So that goes right back into all that training. So we have to really map that in and plot all of that out in our master plan of the scheduling and the training and getting students used to that and everything like that. So that's where I come in, and I'll model a lot of that so that, again, the sustainability, somebody can just take that over after I kind of leave, that gradual release of responsibility and everything like that. The other thing that we really face, I mean, in the MakerSpace area, and this is kind of where I'll divert off to how it may look differently in the elementary system, in the elementary sector, as opposed to middle school and high school. Obviously, sometimes in the high school level, we'll have more stuff, meaning in terms of materials, because they are, they are higher level thinkers. I mean, these kiddos are taking, might be taking physics and this and that. So that is where sometimes you will find more, likely you'll find the 3D printers and everything like that. So now you're talking about physical space. Granted, you will find, 3D printers in the middle school and sometimes in the elementary, but your bigger ticket items will be in the high schools and everything like that. So now you have to really consider your physical space. Obviously, in elementary schools, you have less physical space. I mean, physical space is a commodity. I mean, in your media center and everything, because we still have our physical books and everything like that. So where are we going to fit all these things? The last thing in that whole master plan is safety. And we're not just talking about, the 3D printer or, using, box cutters or this and that. I can tell you some stories about the simple hot glue gun.
Oh, yeah.
Which a hot glue gun, it's almost like, duct tape. I mean, it's a necessity in a makerspace. And I mean, in a true makerspace, because, you'll find, like I said, the 3D printers and everything like that in the makerspaces, but they can be whatever you want them to be. So in terms of safety, I mean, that's a huge aspect. And again, who is going to lead that kind of discussion? Who's going to develop, and this all in that master plan, your posters in this physical space, whether it be your library, your media center, this and that, and setting those guidelines, those expectations, and having those consequences also, building that into maybe crafting that back into your school's discipline plan or anything like that. So again, they're not arbitrary, but glue gun stories where, the chairs, which, are in a classroom or anything, you have a student that will hot glue gun all those 4 legs, and now all of a sudden the chair doesn't move. I mean, a student that wants to explore like their fingers together, and here it is, hot glue gun, and the fingers are together. Or, what if like something with my hair, and all 3 scenarios I have seen in schools. So this is another reason why it's just, you think about very, very simple items, you still have to go through that and really develop those procedures and protocols for safety. So those are some of the things. As far as resources, your materials, wow. This obviously goes back to your theme and everything like that, but there are tons and tons out there. I brought some examples right here. First of all, there are a lot online. Maker Ed is absolutely fantastic. They provide a lot of resources, free resources. This one right here, the MakerSpace playbook, they have a youth playbook. Come on and sit down. The youth and student, like younger playbook and everything like that. Teachers, any of your teachers that attend any STEM-based workshops or anything, have those resources available. Start building those resources. And again, you can really build them right into your media center, and you can have ones that are more for the teachers. You can have ones for your students. This one here is, as you can tell how much I've really enjoyed this book, I have all these little kind of sticky bookmarks. Invent to Learn, which is absolutely fantastic, which even kind of breaks down a lot of our language, which is really important as an entire school when you're looking at creating this makerspace is coming to developing a really shared meaning for a lot of these terms. Maker, making, tinkering, constructing. What does that actually mean? So, I mean, this is a great resource. I mean, any kind of, digital, media, technology based, resources are absolutely fantastic. This one is another one, Pencils to Podcast, because now we're delving into, and especially if you're starting this in your library media center, the idea of documentation, literacy, blogging about the experience, reflective practice, and journaling with students, because the whole makerspace concept is about a process. So when you're talking about engineering, design thinking, you're drawing upon those concepts, it's an ongoing experience. And even though you might have 20 minutes for this challenge or anything like that, because you still are faced with the time constraints when you talk about engineering and all your constraints, you have a time constraint of moving the students out of the library, out of the media center within a half an hour, getting them to understand that it's not a finished product. You can, carry it further, but we have to, exactly like reading a book, that you have to find that ending point, that we ended this chapter, but it's not over. And finding ways of just, documenting the process. And there's a certain, something to be really said for documenting it in handwriting. I mean, those engineering journals of sketching and this and that. But then who's to say you can, implement your technology and take photos of all of those paper, kind of documentation and everything like that. So those are some really, really good resources. The other thing is some variations that are happening with makerspaces, and one area has been in the mobile makerspace. I think some of us may remember a time when art and everything in our schools was kind of like art on a cart, they called it, because the art teacher didn't have a permanent physical space, so kind of brought all the materials on the cart and everything like that. That's another thing in terms of saving on some of the space, incorporating it immediately, that sense of urgency into the classroom, that if students are learning about magnets or electricity or this and that, you have that extended learning on demand, that all of a sudden you don't even have to go anywhere. You can have that student leader bring in that cart and now start opening that up and exploring it and start making and everything like that. The other thing that really kind of targets and cuts down, especially when we talk about a centralized space in our schools and having it be mobile, is that it brings it to everyone in the environment in the school, which is fantastic, because as we know, we're really faced with a lot of inequities in our schools, and we're trying to really get a lot more females, girls interested in STEM-based careers and everything. So having that space be accessible to everyone, exceptional student services, our student, our special education population, students who are English language learners, is absolutely fantastic, because it doesn't depend on reading words. You've got your visuals, your hands-on, your collaboration. So by having it in those spaces, or making it accessible to so many people, and not just just the makerspace for the gifted, program or this and that, cuts across all those boundaries. So that's another thing that you really want to kind of consider. The other thing that's happening now is, I'll talk a little bit more now about the teacher end, in terms of, getting that support and that buy-in of the stakeholders. We've got that one area of our teachers. providing them professional development and to really learn about all these areas so that, like I said, you can create quite a bit of that sustainability. So the more people that you bring into that world and educate them on all those areas, not that you're expecting them to lead those areas, but like I said, just when we break down the safety issues and how many components that we have to really think about in terms of posters and setting those expectations and tying them to, you know, the school discipline plan or anything like that, is what's called micro credentials now. Micro credentials is kind of a new wave in professional development where it actually breaks down all of these areas, so that if, say, right now all you've got time to do is learn and focus on the safety, you know, of a makerspace, you'll go through that and you kind of, you know, get whatever 1 hour of that professional development or a badge or anything like that. So you're not overwhelmed with actually learning about everything. You'll concentrate on just like learning more about the physical space of a makerspace, of the materials that are included. And again, it's kind of like that, you know, scale up possibility in makerspaces where you're adding on, you know, to your existing kind of body of knowledge. So that's one approach too that we take a look at in our educational system of how are we going to provide that ongoing professional development and those learning opportunities for everyone, you know, I mean, including administrators. So that's one area. In terms of the real physical space, and this goes back to that master plan, when you're talking about, okay, these are the spaces, you know, these are the areas that we want to have, these are the, you know, stations that we want to have, you have to, unfortunately, you have to almost do a task analysis and break it down as to exactly what is necessary for those stations. I mean, just to read off a couple of things in terms of your physical areas that you need to consider. Are there particular stations or elements of your makerspace that will need power? And if so, how are you going to provide that? I mean, when you take a look at a library, literally identifying where those outlets are. Do you need extensions of those cords, etc., blah, blah, blah. Water is another element. In the 5th grade curriculum, there is a component of a standard in their science curriculum that goes back to environmental learning, specifically in the area of water. And there's this entire program, if you Google it, it's called Project Wet, which is absolutely fantastic. And there's so many elements of this Project Wet program that a 5th grade classroom teacher or science teacher can never cover all of those areas. So that's a great avenue to, and a segue of including that in the makerspace. Well, you think about it, it's Project Wet, water, okay? So is this, you know, areas, this makerspace going to be pretty close by where there's a faucet? Are you going to have containers for water? If you decide to go mobile and have this be a mobile, you know, kind of makerspace and include that portion, where are you going to draw that water from? Is there going to be a sink available or a hose outside or this and that where you can, you know, kind of acquire that water? All those things. The recycling, you know, asking, you know, your family, your community, you know, the scraps, construction scraps, all those things. Your height and your light, that goes hand in hand. So you have to consider, again, in the scale up with this, that, okay, it might meet all of the kind of height requirement needs as a table and chairs and this and that for your 5th graders in this K through 5 elementary school. Well, what happens when you bring it down to the 1st grade and kindergarten? Are they going to be able to reach things, this and that? When you're talking about light, I mean, there are definitely a lot of circuitry, you know, units and this and that have light sensors. So are you going to be in a room that maybe needs some natural light or, you know, fluorescent light or dimming light or anything, so that whatever you're working with now, all of a sudden that area or that room, that area of the room or whatever, can become dark so this item can move or anything like that. the open space and the configuration of the space, where you want to allow, a space for students just to go off on their own and kind of think and reflect and everything. Have you built that into the consideration, or do you just have those tables and chairs for all that making and building in the center? Your tables, your chairs, your shelving, your tool walls, cabinets, all of those are imperative that you address. I mean, like I said, if you're going to have these tools, just even that simple glue gun, or a hammer or this or that, where are you going to store those? Where are you going to store those safely? Are they going to be in a bin that's kind of locked, or this and that? Your tables and your chairs. You want to kind of develop, something that is not going to look like or function like the classroom. But yet, do you want to have rollers on the chairs where all of a sudden, woo, students are going to be rolling around? Or, yes, you are going to go there, but again, set that in those expectations, everything. Functional furniture is really, really key. I've seen and I've worked with in developing the plans, these tables where they're configured in like a triangle with angles or whatever. So if you move, three of them together, I mean, they're, two or three of them together, they can accommodate, three or four people, but, in like a square. But then if you reconfigure them, and add another table, now it reconfigures where it accommodates, 5 or 6 people in a circular format, kind of like the IKEA. We were talking about IKEA format, where you fold down and now all of a sudden, it's a circular design. Also, again, I mean, to really, really encourage the brainstorming process, because again, this is all about process rather than product. It is not about the one right answer. It's about multiple, answers and multiple paths of getting there. So, I mean, are you going to have your tabletops, like a marker board? And I mean, if they aren't, if you, obtain furniture that isn't, that way, you can certainly look at budgeting that in and going to Home Depot and obtaining those materials and having them cut so that it's fit on your table, so that those students can have that freedom of the markers and just jot down plans and this and that, and those marker board spaces on your walls. Again, if you're in a space that doesn't allow you to put up the walls, or you're using the wall space for shelving and storage, but to find ways that the students can still collaborate in those means and having it be the tabletop. So all of those configurations and everything like that, those are all the things probably making your head explode as far as all the things you need to think about. But that's where it really comes, it becomes really important that you kind of define at the very beginning the roles and responsibilities. Like, I'll give you an example. The space that I'm working on right now at one of our elementary schools, the media center director, who oversees all the media specialists at the elementary schools, he's working on just obtaining all of the storage materials. So the bins that will, almost like computer carts, where we'll store all of the plastic bins that'll have all the Ziploc bags with everything, your inventory in those, everything. He's charged with that. We've got somebody else that's charged with, supplying and obtaining all of the materials that are the consumables, or the ones that are recyclable, reaching out to our families, everything like that. So don't think that, you as one person, the leader that's charged with it, or, a principal, or, that media specialist or whatever, is going to have to think about and do all these things. But nevertheless, they're all addressed in that master plan. Because in terms of materials, what you're looking at, and again, this kind of, is decided sometimes by your grade level, high school, middle school, elementary school. And some of these materials will span across all those. So, you've got your high-tech, materials like 3D printers. You've got, your construction scraps, your recyclables, your 2-liter plastic bottles, all that stuff, office supply things, just simple scissors, and then even breaking that down. I mean, if you're going to incorporate, younger students, having those smaller scissors for the smaller hands, the lefties, and all that stuff. The other thing is, natural materials. So take a look at your surroundings and how much you can incorporate. We're fortunate out here in Arizona that we can incorporate the outside, and have a portion of our MakerSpace that, extends us outside with rocks and trees. I did something with Project Wet a couple of years ago where it was based on, again, water and everything, where we put, water in the Ziploc bag and everything, and then went over to one of the trees with the leaves and closed it and watched that absorption of the water and everything like that. So certainly take advantage of your outside and your natural environment as well. I talked a little bit about signage. Signage is super important, especially, not only for high school, middle school, but especially for the younger students. And even if it is just something that, can be, that isn't really permanent on the walls, but you can kind of project on the screen as, a screen projection, as kind of a flipboard or anything like that. But there's basically different areas of signage, and areas I mean by different concepts or themes of signage that you want. You want the process kind of signage, which is going to remind students of really that this is process orientated rather than product. So you might have those signs of what that engineering design process looks like, the design thinking process. A lot of these are visuals rather than real wordy, like number 1, do this, number 2, because it's not a recipe. So it's very visual. And then you also have to think of your audience. I mean, the kiddos, especially, our students today in our K through 5, incorporate those emojis. They're fabulous, and they're ones that students really relate to. Like a little bit of an angry or a surprise face, like don't do this, with your safety, signage, with rules in terms of, how to use the glue gun properly or the hammer or anything like that. Or, if you need help or assistance, do this, and have that little image of the hand raising or anything like that. So you want to have those functional, pieces of signage, as well as the process, understanding what this MakerSpace is really about. And then you might even want to have some motivational ones, because we are looking at moving our students into an area of being uncomfortable, of having it be a challenge, of developing some of that grit, of understanding that they're going to attempt this several times, of, creating this bridge out of, the wooden stirrers that you get for your coffee or something like here in the cafe, or with paper. And then they've got, some 20 marbles in a in a little container, and it's going to collapse, and it's going to happen once or twice or 3 times, and they're going to become frustrated. So to understand, that kind of aspect of motivation. So that's definitely something for signage. Questions at all? Anything that you want to join in? I feel like I'm talking. So anything?